I'm Rachel, 36 female. I live in a small, neat apartment in the city, a place that's mine and mine alone. For a decade, I worked as a senior financial analyst in London, meticulously managing multi-million-dollar portfolios while sending the majority of my own earnings back home to Pakistan. I did it all for a singular dream: to build a beautiful, sprawling family home where my brother and I and our future families could live together, recreating the warmth we lost when our parents passed away. But that dream, built with my sweat and sacrifice, twisted into my life's most painful lesson when I discovered the foundation wasn't made of concrete and steel, but of my brother's devastating betrayal. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. The dream began 10 years ago on a grainy video call. I was 26, barely a year into my new life in London, feeling the sharp pangs of homesickness. My brother, Mark, 2 years my senior, was back home, trying to make a go of it as a contractor. Our parents had passed away a few years prior, leaving us a modest inheritance and a plot of land in a quiet, respectable suburb of our hometown. "Ratch," Mark had said, his face pixelated but his voice full of excitement, "what if we did it? What if we built the house Dad always talked about, a proper family home on our land? For both of us." The idea took root in my heart instantly. It was a perfect way to honor our parents and to build a future that felt secure and connected, even with an ocean between us. We agreed on a simple, powerful pact. I had the better-paying job, the access to foreign currency. I would be the financial engine. Mark, with his on-the-ground presence and nascent construction experience, would be the project manager. We would be partners, 50-50, in every sense of the word. The house would be in both our names, a testament to our shared effort and sibling bond. So it began. My life in London became a cycle of work, save, send. Every promotion I earned, every bonus I received, wasn't for a new designer bag or a lavish holiday. It was for another wall, another window, another layer of our shared dream. I lived in a tiny flat with 3 other roommates for the first 5 years, eating instant noodles more often than I'd care to admit. While my colleagues talked about their weekend trips to Paris or Rome, I was looking at spreadsheets, calculating currency conversion rates to maximize every single pound I sent home. The first transfer was the biggest, a lump sum for my half of the inheritance, plus my entire first year of savings, to get the foundation laid and the paperwork started. After that, it was a steady, relentless flow. A direct debit was set up from my UK account to his in Pakistan. On the first of every month, without fail, a significant portion of my salary vanished, reappearing thousands of miles away as bags of cement, stacks of bricks, and wages for laborers. Mark was diligent with his updates, at least in the beginning. He would send photos of trenches being dug, of the first concrete being poured. "The foundation is solid, Ratch, just like us," he texted me once, a message I saved for years. He sent architectural plans, which I'd pore over late at night in my small room. We discussed everything. I wanted large windows to let in the natural light, he agreed. I wanted a small garden in the back for a vegetable patch, just like our mom used to have. He promised to make it happen. He'd call me to discuss tile choices, paint colors, and fixture styles. "Which one do you like for the master bathrooms?" he'd ask, holding up 2 different faucets to his phone camera. I felt so involved, so much a part of it. I was the architect of the dream, even from afar. A couple of years into the project, Mark met Jessica. She was vibrant and stylish, with an eye for luxury that was apparent even through a phone screen. I was happy for him. He deserved a partner, and I looked forward to Jessica becoming a part of our family. When they got married, I sent a substantial amount of money for the wedding, insisting it was my gift to them. "Use the house for the reception," I'd suggested, picturing a beautiful celebration in the half-finished structure. They did, and the photos they sent were beautiful. Jessica, in her flowing gown, standing next to Mark, with the bare brick walls behind them, felt symbolic. She was joining our family and our home. After the wedding, things began to subtly shift. The updates became less frequent. When I'd ask for photos of the progress, Mark would be evasive. "It's a surprise, Ratch. I want you to see the big changes when you come home." His requests for money, however, became more urgent. "The price of steel has gone up," he'd explain. "We had an issue with the plumbing contractor, had to hire a more expensive one." I never questioned it. He was my brother. He was on the ground, dealing with the daily headaches. I was just the silent partner with the checkbook. My trust in him was absolute, as solid as the foundation he had promised me. Jessica started a boutique, and I was proud of her entrepreneurial spirit. I assumed Mark's contracting work was paying for it. It never occurred to me to connect the dots in any other way. The money I sent was for the house. It was sacred. It was earmarked for our future, our family legacy. That's what I told myself. In the final year, the requests for funds intensified. It was for the finishing touches, Mark explained. Marble for the floors, imported fittings for the kitchens and bathrooms, landscaping for the garden I'd dreamed of. "We want it to be perfect for when you come back, Rachel. A palace fit for the queen who built it," he'd say, his flattery easily soothing my concerns about the escalating costs. I took out a personal loan in London to cover the last major expense, believing it was the final push to get us over the finish line. After 10 years, the house was finally complete, a decade of my life distilled into brick and mortar. I had poured nearly £250,000 into that project, my inheritance, my savings, my youth. I booked my one-way ticket home, my heart soaring with an emotion so pure it felt like I was flying long before the plane ever left the tarmac. I had done it. I had sacrificed, and now it was time to enjoy the fruits of my labor. I envisioned a tearful, joyous reunion with Mark at the airport, followed by that first magical moment of stepping over the threshold of our home. I had no idea that the foundation of our relationship had crumbled years ago, and I was about to fall right through it. The plane descended through the thick layer of morning haze, and the familiar, chaotic sprawl of my home city came into view. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat of excitement and nerves. 10 years. An entire decade of my life had been lived in shades of London grey, all of it fueled by the promise of this golden homecoming. I smoothed down my shirt for the 10th time, clutching the small housewarming gift I'd brought for Mark and Jessica. It was a framed photo of our parents, young and smiling, a symbolic first piece of our old life to place in our new one. As I walked through the arrivals gate, my eyes scanned the crowd of waiting faces, searching for the one that mattered most. But I couldn't find him. There were families embracing, drivers holding up signs, but no Mark. A knot of disappointment tightened in my stomach. Maybe he was running late, stuck in traffic. I sent him a quick text. "Landed, just came through customs. Where are you?" I waited. 10 minutes turned into 20, then 30. The initial thrill of my arrival began to curdle into a sour mix of confusion and hurt. Finally, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Mark. "Sorry, Ratch, got held up with a supplier. Huge traffic jam, just grab a taxi, you know the address. The door's open." No welcome home. No so excited to see you. Just a curt, logistical instruction. I tried to shake off the sting. He was a busy contractor, I reminded myself. Things come up. It didn't mean anything. But as the taxi wound its way through the familiar streets, a sense of unease settled over me. This wasn't the reunion I had spent years dreaming of. When the taxi pulled up to the address, my breath caught in my throat. The house was magnificent. It was even more beautiful than the pictures. 2 stories of clean, modern lines, a lush green lawn, and a beautiful oak door that I had specifically picked out from a catalog 2 years ago. For a moment, the disappointment vanished, replaced by a wave of overwhelming pride. I built this. I paid the driver, pulled my suitcases up the paved walkway, and took a deep, shaky breath before pushing open the heavy oak door. "Mark! Jessica, I'm home!" I called out, my voice echoing in the cavernous, marble-tiled foyer. Silence. Then I heard footsteps, not running to greet me but strolling leisurely from a room down the hall. Jessica appeared, holding a coffee mug. She was dressed in expensive-looking loungewear, her hair perfectly styled. She didn't rush to hug me. She stopped, leaned against the doorframe, and gave me a cool, assessing look. "Rachel, you're here," she said. It wasn't a question or an exclamation of joy. It was a simple, flat statement of fact. "Jessica, it's so good to see you in person," I said, trying to inject some warmth into the chilly atmosphere. I moved forward for a hug, but she preempted it by taking a sip of her coffee, a subtle but clear gesture of avoidance. "Mark's been so busy," she said, her tone implying that my arrival was an inconvenient interruption. "He'll be back later." The house was stunningly decorated. Everything was sleek, modern, and looked like it had been lifted from the pages of a design magazine. It was also deeply impersonal. There were no family photos on the walls, no quirky knickknacks that speak of a shared history. It felt less like a home and more like a showroom. My room, Jessica explained, was upstairs at the end of the hall. She pointed vaguely in the direction before turning her attention back to her phone. As I dragged my heavy suitcases up the polished wooden staircase, a sense of alienation washed over me. This grand house, paid for with my life savings, felt utterly foreign. The room she'd indicated was nice enough, a guest room clearly. It was tastefully decorated but sterile, with none of the personal touches we had discussed. The large window I had requested was there, but the view was of the neighbor's wall. The master suite, the one I had imagined would be mine, was at the other end of the hall. I could see its double doors were slightly ajar. Later that evening, Mark finally came home. He greeted me with a quick, one-armed hug, his eyes darting around the foyer. "Hey, Ratch, welcome back. Place looks great, right?" he said, his voice laced with a strange, nervous energy. He seemed more like a real estate agent showing off a property than a brother welcoming his sister home. The three of us had a tense, awkward dinner. I tried to reminisce about our childhood, about our parents, but Mark and Jessica would offer one-word answers before changing the subject to their friends, their business, or a recent party they'd attended. I felt like a stranger, an outsider at their table. When I presented them with the framed photo of our parents, Jessica gave a tight smile. "Oh, that's vintage," she said, placing it face down on a side table. "We'll find a spot for it later." They never did. The breaking point came a few days later. I was trying to find a spare key for the main door and was looking through a drawer in the kitchen island. Inside, underneath a pile of takeout menus, was a stack of mail. It was all addressed to Mr. Mark and Mrs. Jessica last name. My name was nowhere. Curious, I looked at a utility bill. It was in Mark's name only. So was the internet bill and the cable subscription. A cold dread began to seep into my bones. That evening, I approached Mark while he was watching TV. Jessica was out with friends. "Mark," I began, trying to keep my voice casual. "I was thinking we should probably get my name officially added to the house bills and everything, just to make it all proper." He didn't look away from the screen. "Yeah, we'll get to it. It's just a lot of hassle, all that paperwork." "It shouldn't be too hard," I pressed. "And I'd like to see the final property deed as well, just for my own records. The one from the land registry office." He finally turned to look at me, and for the first time I saw a flicker of something in his eyes. It wasn't annoyance. It was panic. "Why do you need to see that?" he asked, his voice suddenly sharp. "Everything is fine, Rachel. I handled it all. You don't need to worry about it." "I'm not worried," I lied, my heart starting to pound. "I just want a copy. As a co-owner, I should have one." He stood up, his posture defensive. "Just drop it, okay? You just got home. Let's not get into boring financial stuff. I'm tired." He turned and walked out of the room, leaving me alone in the dim glow of the television. The welcome I had dreamed of was a fantasy. The warm, loving home I had built in my mind didn't exist. I was a guest here, a guest in my own house. And my brother, the person I trusted most in the world, was hiding something from me. I fell asleep that night not in a palace of my own making, but in a cold, unfamiliar house, with the terrifying realization that the foundation of lies ran much deeper than I could ever have imagined. The days that followed were a masterclass in passive aggression and avoidance. Every time I tried to bring up the topic of the house documents, Mark would suddenly have an urgent call to take or an errand to run. Jessica would sigh dramatically, accusing me of stressing Mark out and not appreciating the beautiful home they've provided for me. The word, they, was a tiny dagger every time she used it. The house was slowly but surely being framed as their sole achievement, their sole property. My decade of sacrifice was being erased from the narrative, one casual comment at a time. I felt like I was losing my mind. Was I overreacting? Had I misunderstood our agreement all those years ago? I combed through my old emails and text messages, searching for the explicit conversation where we agreed on joint ownership. I found it, an email from 9 years ago in the very early stages. My words were clear. Just confirming, Mark, that the property will be registered in both our names as 50-50 owners. His reply was equally unequivocal. Of course, Ratch. That's the whole point. We're in this together. Armed with this proof, I felt a surge of confidence. He couldn't deny Hi's own words. I decided to stop asking and start looking. If he wouldn't show me the deed, I would find it myself. I knew Mark. Despite the fancy house, he was still disorganized. Important documents were likely stashed away in his home office, a room I'd been tacitly discouraged from entering. My chance came one afternoon when Mark and Jessica went out for a long lunch with friends. The house was quiet, the silence amplifying the frantic beat of my heart. My hands were trembling as I walked to the frosted glass door of his office and turned the handle. It was unlocked. The room was surprisingly messy, a stark contrast to the pristine minimalism of the rest-off house. Papers were piled on the desk, shelves were crammed with binders and folders. It was the nerve center of his contracting business, and somewhere in this chaotic mess lay the truth. I started with the desk drawers, moving methodically, trying not to disturb the clutter too much. I found invoices, receipts, blueprints for other projects, but nothing related to our house. Next, I turned to the filing cabinet in the corner. The drawers were labeled by year. I pulled open the one for the year the land was officially transferred for construction. My fingers flew across the tabs: permits, suppliers, taxes. And then I saw it, a folder labeled simply with the property's address. My breath hitched. My hands felt cold and clumsy as I lifted the folder out and placed it on the desk. Inside was a collection of documents: building permits, utility connection forms, and architectural drawings. At the very bottom was a thick Chinese letter-looking document, stapled together and stamped with an official seal from the city's land registry office. The property deed. I sank into Mark's leather office chair, my legs suddenly too weak to support me. I took a deep breath and began to read. The legal language was dense, but the key details were impossible to misinterpret. The section for the registered owner's name was what I was looking for. My eyes scanned the page, searching for my name, Rachel. It wasn't there. Under the heading Registered Proprietor S, there was only one name listed, typed out in bold, black ink: Mark last name. I read it again, and a third time, hoping my eyes were deceiving me, that I was missing something, a clause, an addendum, a second page, but there was nothing. The document was clear, legal, and final. He was the sole, undisputed owner of the property. The house that I had poured my soul and my life savings into building belonged, in the eyes of the law, entirely to my brother. A wave of nausea washed over me. The room began to spin. Every late night at the office, every lonely weekend, every sacrifice I had made flashed before my eyes. It all culminated in this single, brutal piece of paper. It wasn't a partnership. It was a long con. He had never intended to share the house with me. He had used me. He had used my love, my trust, and my money to build a life for himself and his wife, a life from which I was completely excluded. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at the document, a hollow, ringing sound in my ears. The sense of betrayal was so profound, so physically painful, it felt like a part of my body had been amputated without anesthetic. This wasn't just about money or property. It was about my entire family, my sense of belonging, my past, and my future. Mark was all the family I had left, and he had systematically betrayed me for a decade. Just then, I heard the sound of the front door opening. Mark and Jessica were home. Panic seized me. I quickly but carefully placed the deed back in the folder, slid the folder back into the filing cabinet, and shut the drawer. I straightened the chair and smoothed out the papers on the desk, trying to make it look untouched. I slipped out of the office, closing the door softly behind me, my heart pounding like a drum. I made it to my room just as they were coming up the stairs, their laughter echoing in the hall. I shut my door and leaned against it, gasping for air as if I'd just run a marathon. The sound of their cheerful, oblivious chatter from the other end of the hallway was the cruelest irony. They were laughing in a house bought with my tears. That night there was no confrontation. There were no angry words, no tearful accusations. I couldn't even look at Mark. The brother I had loved and trusted was gone, replaced by a stranger who had been lying to me for 10 years. I sat through another silent, agonizing dinner, pushing food around my plate. When he asked if I was feeling okay, I simply nodded, a cold, hard knot of resolve forming in the pit of my stomach. The grief was still there, a raw, open wound. But beneath it, something else was beginning to stir. A cold, quiet anger. The devastation was complete, but my story wasn't over. He had written the beginning of this chapter, but I would be the one to write the end. For the next week, I was a ghost in my own house. I moved quietly, spoke little, and observed everything. The shock had subsided, leaving behind a chilling clarity. Grief had frozen into fuel. Mark and Jessica, sensing the shift in my mood but misinterpreting it as homesickness or exhaustion, mostly left me alone. This gave me the space I needed to stop feeling and start thinking. My mind, trained to find patterns in complex financial data, kicked into gear. I wasn't just a heartbroken sister anymore. I was an analyst, and my brother's decade-long fraud was my new project. My first call was to the one person in the world I knew I could trust implicitly, our Uncle David. He was our father's older brother, a retired architect who was as wise and steady as my own father had been. I asked him to meet me at a small coffee shop in the city, far from the house and any prying ears. When he saw me, his kind eyes crinkled with concern. "Rachel, you look like you're carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders," he said, pulling me into a warm hug that almost shattered my composure. I took a shaky breath and laid out the entire story, from the initial agreement 10 years ago to the discovery of the deed in Mark's office. I expected him to be shocked, perhaps even disbelieving. But as I spoke, his expression hardened from concern into a quiet, simmering anger. He listened patiently, not interrupting once. "That boy," he said softly when I finished, his voice tight with disappointment. "I had my concerns. The way he was spending money, I assumed his business was doing better than it was." He shook his head. "Rachel, what he did is not just immoral, it's fraud." His validation was the first crack of light in my dark tunnel of despair. He wasn't just offering sympathy, he was offering a plan. "The first thing we need is evidence," he said, his architect's mind immediately creating a blueprint for our investigation. "Every shred of it. We need to build a case so strong he can't possibly wriggle out of it." That night, I began my digital excavation. I locked myself in my room and opened my laptop. For years, I had meticulously saved my financial records. I went back 10 years, downloading every bank statement from my UK account. I highlighted every single transfer made to Mark. The list grew longer and longer, a digital testament to my sacrifice. I organized them by date and amount in a spreadsheet, the final sum at the bottom, a staggering figure that made me feel sick to my stomach. £247,500. Next, I went through my emails. I created a separate folder and dragged in every single message exchanged with Mark about the house. The early ones filled with promises of our home. The mid-project ones with his excuses for rising costs. The later ones, brief and dismissive. I printed them all, creating a thick chronological file. I did the same with our text message history, taking screenshots of every relevant conversation, especially the early one where he explicitly agreed to the 50-50 ownership. It was a mountain of evidence, a paper trail of his deceit. While I was handling the financial side, Uncle David began his own investigation. As a retired architect with decades of experience and contacts in the city, he knew exactly what to look for. He told me he was going to casually visit the city planning office to look up the public records for the property. A few days later, he called me, his voice grim. "It's worse than we thought, Rachel," he said. "Mark filed all the construction permits as the sole owner from day one. But that's not all. I know the standard costs for materials and labor in that area, based on the size and type of house he built, and even accounting for inflation, your £250,000 is far more than what that house should have cost." He wasn't just building a house, he was padding his pockets. Uncle David suggested we get an independent assessment. He called a trusted colleague, a professional quantity surveyor, and asked him to do a discreet evaluation of the property. The surveyor, pretending to be a potential buyer interested in the neighborhood, did a walk around and took photos. His report, which he delivered to us a week later, was damning. The surveyor confirmed Uncle David's suspicions. The house, while aesthetically pleasing on the surface, had been built using mid-range and, in some cases, subpar materials. The marble tiles were a cheaper grade that was prone to cracking. The imported kitchen fittings were convincing knockoffs. The foundational work, according to the public plans, was adequate but not to the high standard Mark had claimed he was paying for. The surveyor's final estimate of the total construction cost was roughly 60% of the amount I had sent. The spreadsheet on my laptop now had a new column, Estimated Actual Cost. The column next to it was Discrepancy. The final number in that column was nearly £100,000. £100,000 that had vanished into thin air. Sud. NLY, it all made sense. Jessica's expensive boutique, their lavish lifestyle, the designer clothes, the frequent parties. I hadn't been just building a house. I had been funding their entire life. They weren't just living in my house, they were wearing my money, eating my money, and socializing with my money. The betrayal had layers I hadn't even begun to comprehend. He hadn't just stolen a house from me, he had siphoned off my life's work, drop by drop, for a decade. I sat in front of my laptop, looking at the spreadsheet, the email printouts, and the surveyor's report spread across my bed. The numbers and words swam before my eyes. This was my case. The dots were connected. The money was followed. I finally understood the full scope of what had been done to me. The heartbroken girl who had arrived a few weeks ago was gone. In her place sat a woman with a mountain of evidence and a heart full of ice. The investigation was over. It was time to make a plan. Holding the file of evidence felt like holding a bomb. It was heavy with proof, with lies, with a decade of my life reduced to numbers on a page. My first instinct was to run into the living room and detonate it, to scream and cry and throw the papers in Mark's face. But Uncle David's calm voice on the phone held me back. "Emotion is their advantage, Rachel," he had wisely advised. "They will paint you as hysterical, as the crazy sister making wild accusations. We will not give them that satisfaction. We will be methodical, strategic, and cold. We will play hardball." His words resonated deep within me. I had been a victim of my own emotions, my love for my brother, my trust, my nostalgia for a family that no longer existed. That part of me was now a liability. To win this, I had to operate like I did at my job in London, with data, with logic, and with a clear, unwavering objective. The objective was twofold. First, I wanted my money back. Not just what the house was worth, but every single pound I had sent, including the nearly $100,000 he had skimmed off the top. Second, I wanted justice, and not just the legal kind. I wanted him exposed. I wanted our extended family, the aunts, uncles, and cousins who he and Jessica boasted to know exactly who he was and what he had done. His reputation was as important to him as the money, and I was determined to dismantle both. My first strategic move was to find a lawyer. Uncle David recommended a woman named Mrs. Khan, a renowned property and contract dispute lawyer known for being as sharp as a razor. He called her a lioness. I liked the sound of that. I met Mrs. Khan in her stark, modern office. She was an impeccably dressed woman in her 50s with an air of intimidating competence. I didn't cry or get emotional. I simply opened my file and laid out the evidence on her large mahogany desk. The bank statements, the emails, the text messages, the property deed, and the quantity surveyor's report. She listened intently, her eyes scanning each document. She was silent for a long time after I finished speaking, her steepled fingers tapping softly on the desk. Finally, she looked up at me, a flicker of something that looked like respect in her eyes. "This is one of the most comprehensive records of financial contribution and fraudulent misrepresentation I have ever seen from a client," she said, her voice crisp and professional. "He never thought you'd be this meticulous." "I'm a financial analyst," I replied. "It's my job." "Good," she nodded. "Legally, your position is strong, but a court battle could take years and be emotionally draining. He's counting on you not having the stomach for it. So, we won't start there. We will start with overwhelming, inescapable leverage." The plan she outlined was brilliant in its simplicity and aggression. It was a three-phase attack. Phase 1 was the formal legal approach. Mrs. Khan would draft a legal notice to be delivered to Mark. It would be a demand letter, not a lawsuit. It would state, in no uncertain terms, that we had evidence of my total financial contribution, his written promises of co-ownership, and a professional assessment of construction fraud. The letter would demand that he either sign a transfer deed putting my name on the property as a 50% owner and pay back the embezzled £100,000, or agree to sell the house on the open market, with 100% of the proceeds going to me until my full investment was repaid. We would give him 7 days to respond. "This will terrify him," Mrs. Khan explained. "The official legal letterhead, the clarity of the accusations. It tells him you are not just an emotional sister, but a serious adversary with legal counsel." Phase 2 was the financial pressure. While living in the house, I had noticed mail from several different banks. Mark was juggling debt. The fancy lifestyle was leveraged. With my funding cut off, his cash flow would be non-existent. Uncle David, through his contacts, did some quiet digging and confirmed that Mark had 2 significant business loans against which he had likely used the property, now in his sole name, as collateral. An official legal dispute over the ownership of that collateral would be a red flag to any bank. A simple, well-placed inquiry from my lawyer to his bank's legal departments about a pending ownership claim could freeze his credit lines almost instantly. Phase 3, the most potent part of the plan, was the family front. Uncle David would call for a formal family meeting. Not a casual get-together, but a serious council of the elders, our other uncles and respected cousins. It was an old-fashioned tradition, but in our family, its judgment carried immense weight. We would hold it at Uncle David's house. Mark would be summoned. He wouldn't be able to refuse without looking guilty. "At that meeting," Mrs. Khan instructed, "you will present your case. Not with anger, but with facts. Let your uncle lead. Present the evidence calmly and clearly. In our culture, shame can be a more powerful motivator than the law." The plan was set. It was a perfect blend of modern legal strategy and traditional family pressure. For the next few days, I lived a double life. In the house, I was quiet and withdrawn. Outside of it, I was a general preparing for war. Mrs. Khan drafted the legal notice. I gathered the bank details for Mark's business loans. Uncle David made the calls, his grave and serious tone leaving no room for refusal. The family meeting was set for the Sunday of the same week. The legal notice would be delivered. On Tuesday morning, a courier delivered the legal notice to the house. Jessica signed for it, assuming it was something for Mark's business. I watched from the top of the stairs as Mark came home, opened the envelope, and read the letter. All the color drained from his face. He read it again, his hands shaking. He looked up, his eyes searching the house until they found me, standing silently on the landing. The look in his eyes was no longer one of arrogance or dismissal. It was pure, unadulterated fear. He knew, in that instant, that the game was over. The heartbroken sister he had so easily manipulated was gone. He was now dealing with a creditor, an adversary, and the architect of his downfall. The hardball game had just begun. The air in Uncle David's living room was thick with tension. It was a large, comfortable room that I usually associated with happy family gatherings, but today it felt like a courtroom. My uncles and two of my older respected cousins sat on one side, their faces stern and unreadable. They were the jury. On the other side, on a sofa that seemed to swallow them whole, sat Mark and Jessica. Mark was pale, his usual confident demeanor completely gone. Jessica sat rigidly beside him, her face a mask of defiant indignation, but her constantly fidgeting hands betrayed her nervousness. I sat next to Uncle David, a neat stack of files on the coffee table in front of me. The legal notice had been delivered 5 days ago. As predicted, Mark had tried to call me, alternating between angry blustering and pathetic pleading. I hadn't answered a single call. My only response had been a text message. "We will discuss this on Sunday at Uncle David's." Uncle David, as the family elder, began the proceedings. His voice was calm but carried an undeniable weight of authority. "We are here today to discuss a grave matter that affects the honor of this family," he began, looking directly at Mark. "Rachel has brought forward a serious complaint against you, Mark. We are here to listen to both sides and to understand the truth." Mark started to speak, his voice shaky. "Uncle, this is just a misunderstanding. Rachel is emotional. She just came back home. She's confused." "There is no confusion, Mark." Uncle David cut him off, his voice sharp. He turned to me. "Rachel, please tell us what happened." I took a deep breath, looked at the faces of my family, and began to speak. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I presented the facts as if I were delivering a financial report to a board of directors. I started with the verbal agreement made 10 years ago. Then, I laid the first document on the table, the printout of the email where he explicitly agreed to 50-50 ownership. "This is an email from Mark, dated 9 years ago, confirming our partnership," I said, sliding it across the table. One of my cousins picked it up and read it, his eyebrows raising slightly before he passed it to the others. Next, I presented the bank statements. I didn't show them all, just the summary spreadsheet. For 10 years, I worked in London. I sent home a total of £247,500. This spreadsheet details every single transfer, by date and amount. I placed the spreadsheet on top of the email. Jessica scoffed. She was contributing to the family. It was her duty. My Uncle David shot her a look so cold it silenced her instantly. At her finish. I then placed the surveyor's report on the table. This is a report from an independent quantity surveyor, a professional who assesses construction costs. He evaluated the house and estimated the total cost of materials and labor to be, at the highest estimate, £150,000. I let that sink in. The math was simple. That leaves a discrepancy of £97,500. Nearly £100,000 that I sent for the house, which was never spent on the house. A low murmur went through the room. Mark's face had gone from pale to ashen. He opened his mouth to protest, but no words came out. Finally, I took out a copy of the property deed. "And this," I said, my voice dropping slightly, "is the official deed for the house built with my life savings." I placed it on the very top of the pile. "As you can see, the sole registered owner is Mark. My name is nowhere to be found." The room was silent for a full minute. The weight of the 4 documents on the table, the promise, the payment, the fraud, and the betrayal, was immense. My uncles and cousins looked from the papers to Mark, their expressions now a mixture of shock and profound disappointment. "Mark," one of my older uncles said, his voice heavy with sorrow, "is this true? Did you put the house only in your name?" Mark couldn't meet his eyes. He just stared at the floor and gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. Jessica, however, found her voice. "He managed the project. He did all the hard work on the ground while she was off living a fancy life in London. He deserves the house. She was just sending money." £250,000 is not just money," Uncle David thundered, rising to his feet. "It was her entire life's work. It was her inheritance. He didn't just manage the project, he stole from his own sister. He stole her dream and her future, and he did it while smiling to her face. He turned his gaze back to Mark. You have brought shame upon this family. You have broken the most sacred trust there is, that between a brother and a sister who have no one else in the world. What do you have to say for yourself? Mark finally looked up, his eyes filled with tears. But they weren't tears of remorse, they were tears of self-pity. I didn't mean for it to happen like this, he whimpered. Things got expensive, Jessica's business. We had to keep up appearances. I was going to tell her eventually. It was the weakest, most pathetic excuse I had ever heard. The room saw it for what it was. The verdict was silent but unanimous. It was written on every face in the room. He was guilty. Uncle David laid out the ultimatum, which was the same as the one in Mrs. Khan's legal letter. You have two choices, Mark. You will either sign the legal documents to transfer 50% of the house to Rachel and work out a plan to repay her the £100,000 you stole, or you will sell the house. From the sale, Rachel will be paid back her entire investment of £250,000 first. You will get whatever is left, if anything. You have 24 hours to decide. If you refuse, Rachel will proceed with her lawsuit, and this entire family will stand behind her. You will be on your own. The meeting was over. Mark and Jessica left without another word, their heads bowed in shame. I stayed behind, and for the first time in weeks, the icy dam inside me broke. I sat with my uncles and cried, not just for the betrayal, but also for the overwhelming relief of being seen, heard, and believed. They had stood by me. I wasn't alone. The power had shifted completely. Mark was no longer in control of the narrative or the asset. His fortress of lies, built with my money, had been brought crashing down by a few simple pieces of paper and the unshakable power of the truth. The call came the next morning. It was Mark. His voice was hollow, defeated. I'll sell the house, he said. There was no argument, no negotiation. He knew he had no other choice. The combination of legal pressure, financial jeopardy from the banks, and complete condemnation from the family had left him with no cards left to play. The process that followed was methodical and devoid of emotion. Mrs. Khan handled everything, ensuring I was completely insulated from having to deal with Mark or Jessica directly. They moved out of the house within 2 weeks, taking their designer furniture and their shame with them, and went to stay with Jessica's parents. I never set foot in that house again. The day the real estate agent came to list it, I was in a small, rented apartment in the city, a space that felt more like a home than that grand, empty mansion ever had. The house sold quickly. The market was good and its curb appeal was undeniable, a bitter irony that wasn't lost on me. Mrs. Khan set up an escrow account, and when the sale closed, the funds were transferred directly, as per hour. Legal agreement, the first £250,000, every pound I had invested and every pound he had stolen, was wired directly to a new bank account I had opened. It was a staggering amount of money to see in one place, but it didn't bring me joy. It brought me a quiet, profound sense of closure. It was the sound of a painful chapter of my life finally clicking shut. After my share was paid, there was some money left over for Mark. Enough for him to start over, but not nearly enough to sustain the lavish lifestyle he and Jessica had grown accustomed to. The fallout within the family was significant. No one disowned him completely, but a permanent line had been drawn. The easy warmth and respect he had once commanded were gone, replaced by a cool, distant disappointment. He had to live with the consequences of his actions every day, in the averted gazes and polite, but strained conversations at family functions. He had traded his family's trust for a few years of living a lie, and the price was a lifetime of shame. I never spoke to him again directly. He sent me a long, rambling text message once, full of excuses and apologies that rang hollow. He blamed Jessica, he blamed financial pressure, he blamed everyone but himself. I read it, deleted it, and blocked his number. Forgiveness might come someday, far in the future, but trust was a structure that, once demolished, could never be rebuilt. With the money secured, I had a choice to make. I could go back to London, to my old job and my old life. But something had changed within me. The ordeal had been excruciating, but it had also forged a new kind of strength and independence in me. I no longer felt the need to recreate the past or build a home for a scattered family. I realized the only home I needed to build was my own, on my own terms. I decided to stay in Pakistan. I used a portion of the money to buy a beautiful, modern apartment for myself in a vibrant part of the city. It wasn't a mansion. It didn't have a sprawling garden. But every tile, every fixture, every piece of furniture was chosen by me and paid for by me. The deed, when I signed it, had one name on it: Rachel. I invested the rest of the money, using my financial skills to build a portfolio that would secure my future. I left the high-stress world of corporate finance and started my own consulting business, helping small businesses and startups manage their finances. It was more fulfilling than any multi-million-dollar deal I had ever closed in London. My relationship with Uncle David and the rest of my family grew even stronger. They had stood by me when it mattered most, and that bond was worth more than any house. We gathered often, not in a grand, imposing mansion, but in the warmth of each other's homes, sharing meals and laughter. Sometimes, when I'm sitting on my balcony looking out at the city lights, I think about that house. It stands as a monument to a painful lesson learned. Trust should never be blind, and family is not just about blood, it's about integrity, respect, and honesty. Mark built a house, but I built a life. He is trapped in the ruins of his reputation, while I am free, standing on a foundation that no one can ever take away from me again. A foundation built not of lies or deceit, but of my own resilience and hard-won strength.